With our first gang, we would end up having the Occult Research Club. Now, I know what you're thinking, it doesn't really sound like much of a gang after all because it is a research club at a university. These college students would have a really interesting motivation, with it being an interest that delves into the depths of ghouls. With that being said, these students would make any and every effort in an attempt to figure out whether or not their own fellow students were also ghouls just blending in on their campus. Long story short, they would be playing detective to figure out whether or not ghouls were in their school. Honestly, I wouldn't blame anyone for underestimating them, but they do have a lot going on, especially with Hide being a member. As I say this, Hide doesn't have too much experience as a detective, but we all know he is very intelligent and has a lot of plans that can actually make up for figuring out who can and cannot be a ghoul. When he figured out that Jason was a shady character, Hide would actually end up bugging Jason's clothing and learning everything about him. With Hide being a part of the research club, he would have people like Nishiki and Kaneki on campus as ghouls, trying to blend in with other students, leaving Hide to end up finding out that Kaneki is actually a ghoul. Obviously, Hide would know this for a very long time, and Nishiki also wouldn't be safe in case he was actually trying to feast on someone at the college. A club at a college took it upon themselves to hunt down ghouls. Who would have ever thought? Now we have the Gas Masks, which would be a gang of ghouls from the 6th Ward, with Banjo being their leader, and as we already know, he's not really much of a fighter. So if any rival gangs had a bone to pick with the Gas Masks, these guys wouldn't really survive a single fight. The main thing that stands out about the Gas Masks is the very fact that these guys are in it for the fashion, the style. You really can't go wrong. Each and every one of these guys wears a unique hoodie with a special mask with their own personal number on it. The Gas Masks would run the streets of the 11th Ward until aogiri tree would finally end up coming to them, only to force the Gas Masks to work in the name of aogiri, because after all, the Gas Masks would be ghouls and aogiri is an all-ghoul organization. What would happen to the future of this gang? It would be really difficult to say. Here we have Anti-Aogiri, which would be another gang founded by Banjo. This gang would be made for the sole purpose of allowing prisoners of aogiri an outlet to be able to finally escape from aogiri's clutches. Members of Anti-Aogiri would suffer from imprisonment, and this would be one of their only ways of actually finding a means to escape. With Kaneki being captured by aogiri, Banjo would invite Kaneki to join Anti-Aogiri, also that the plan to escape aogiri imprisonment can actually come into fruition. Members of the Gas Masks gang would also be a part of the Anti-Aogiri gang. Futamaru would be a gang in the 20th Ward, which would have a huge amount of members, but would unfortunately meet a gruesome end due to Ayato and Toka killing a majority of its members. Ayato and Toka would kill the leader of Futamaru, and Futamaru would chase the duo at an attempt in cold-blooded revenge. While hunting Toka down, Futamaru would see Toka talking to Shota's father, and seeing this, the gang would jump at the opportunity and abduct the father, all in the hopes of using a hostage to catch Toka right where they want her. However, Ayato would show up just to rescue his sister, only to kill the rest of the Futamaru members. Later after this, the child of the man who was left hostage would make contact with the CCG and come to Mato for any kind of help in their plot for revenge. Ironically enough, Mato, being a man of revenge himself, would end up finding Futamaru, make his way into their base, and kill the last surviving member of the gang. Here we would have the Blades, with their other alias being the Three Blades. This group would come from a band of ghouls that would come together to avoid any kind of conflict with human society. Unfortunately, these ghouls would fail in their overall evolution, allowing them to have multiple deformities, with them being very short and having poor health. If you really think about it, these ghouls would be much like hermits. Their lifestyle of avoiding conflict would ultimately change their genetics, which in turn would make them ghouls that are very easy to hunt for other ghouls in the CCG alike. After reaching adulthood, Misa Kusaraki would end up being the leader of this gang. With her in charge, the Blades would fight their own battles and even stick up for themselves against other ghouls, causing them to even become rivals of the Bin brothers. Yet, with this gang being a gang of ghouls naturally, they would get swallowed up by aogiri's ideals and end up becoming a part of aogiri. And after the fall of aogiri, they would find themselves becoming a part of the gang Goat. This next gang is actually gonna blow your mind, with it being Shueisha. Shueisha would be much like the publishing company in Japan, Shueisha. In real life, Shueisha would end up publishing Tokyo Ghoul, yet in the manga, Shueisha would publish Sen Takatsuki's stories, and these stories would impact society as a whole and allow ghouls an outlet to give people an understanding as to what a life as a ghoul is like. If it wasn't for Shueisha, the influence of ghouls and the dream of allowing ghouls to live a regular life would be nothing more than a pipe dream. Shueisha is not only a great creative outlet, but it was also a way to get people to further understand an author by reading all of their work. Shueisha would have allowed many people to get their hands on King Beiliger, which is a story that Takatsuki wrote, yet this book would have never reached the hands of the masses if it wasn't for this publishing company after all. Shueisha without a doubt played a major role in changing the society of Tokyo Ghoul, and maybe even our own society, if you want to dig that deep at least. There is definitely a constant and existing influence by Shueisha in real life and in Tokyo Ghoul. Surprisingly enough, Great Wheel Act would be an organization founded by humans for the sole purpose of supporting ghouls. Shueisha would have without a doubt played a part in influencing the creation of this organization that ultimately just wants to change society for the better. This gang would be described as a cult, with its humble beginning starting from a group of students inside of Kami University. A medical student would come up with the idea of treating humans and ghouls alike, coming from something that would be considered no different than a class club into a societal figure and being recognized as a cult. Just goes to show how much change anyone can make by coming together and forming a gang or organization. With that being said, the founder of this gang would be Kimi Nishino. The Skull Masks would be a gang that would work around in the 13th Ward. They would be easy to recognize because they would wear masks that were inspired by skulls. The first interaction with the Skull Mask gang would begin with Juzo and Hanbei both noticing a groper on a subway train. Hanbei would notice this forced interaction between this disgusting man and this innocent girl. Unfortunately, he would not possess the courage to do anything about it. In this case, Juzo would end up stopping this disgusting groper. As the day would continue, night would eventually fall, and Juzo, alongside his teammate Hanbei, would find this same groper on the subway train, being attacked by the Skull Mask gang. Juzo would face off against the leader of the Skull Masks, and he would eventually lose his weapon from his own recklessness, leaving him right in front of death's door. Hanbei would take notice of this and eventually fight his own fears so that he can save Juzo's life, causing him to stab right through the leader of the Skull Masks. We would come to realize that the leader of the Skull Mask gang was none other than this same girl that was getting groped on the subway train. It really makes you think about how this situation would have been handled if this girl hadn't been a ghoul. A girl was killed even though she was unrightfully touched, while a groper gets to walk the streets at the cost of his arm. In actuality, the leader of the Skull Masks shouldn't have tried to get revenge on this groper. The United Front would be made in another attempt to be able to change society. This organization would be a partner of the Tokyo Security Committee, with their ultimate goal being the coexistence between humans and ghouls, whether it be keeping the peace, fostering orphans, or even utilizing public education. Ghouls and humans would be able to live life with more opportunities thanks to the United Front. To top that off, a specific trading company known as Sphinx would be one of the main distributors of Queen K and RC cell technology, with this being the liquid solution that they would use in order to supply the CCG with the means that they need in order to exterminate more and more ghouls. Long story short, Sphinx would be obtaining a lot of money over the deaths of ghouls and CCG members alike. Now, would you call that blood money or ghoul money? Kurona and Nashiro's father would end up starting this company over his father's wealth, which would all be due to the trading company's success, but this would all be a lie. This is nothing more than a facade. Kurona and Nashiro's father would, at the end of the day, end up in massive debt, and the CCG officials would take care of his debt, just so that his family's mansion could be used to cover up a laboratory plot for ghoul experimentation. The father of the twins would ultimately find himself distraught from the inhumane treatment that was going on within his own house. In an attempt to leak the information about these experiments, the CCG would then take his life, leaving the trading company in shambles alongside a wide open door for more human experiments. It would only get worse because the entire foundation of this company and the people behind it would be nothing more than a lie. The CCG would even lie about the owner's death and cover it up as a ghoul attack because most people in society would accept and not have a problem with this. Yet it was the very CCG who aims to protect the people that took advantage of a person's debt and their pride, all so that they could do things that were anything but human. Ghoul Forschungsgesellschaft would be a German-based research organization which would specialize in the research of ghouls, and this place would also be in Germany. Not much would be known about this organization outside of the fact that they would be heavily involved with some of the practices in Tokyo, with even members of the Tokyo branch of ghoul research being able to study abroad in Germany, allowing Japan to further their research when it comes to the development and the execution of ghouls, thanks to groundbreaking scientists such as Dr. Kano being able to get more and more information from them. Not much is known about Ghoul Forschungsgesellschaft, but one thing is definitely clear: their intelligence supported Japan one way or another. Now we have the Roswald family. This would be a family that would be heavily associated with ghoul aristocracy. With their family tree stemming from Germany, you could only really come to the conclusion as to how far their power would really extend when it comes to the world of ghouls. They would end up making a huge connection to the Tsukiyama family, and their power would only grow even more, thanks to Tsukiyama's grandfather meeting a lover in Germany and ending up having a child with her, with his newly found daughter being Kaine. Kaine would be the last member of the Roswald family thanks to their extermination being carried out by the Washu clan. Kaine would find herself in Japan, and she would ultimately serve the Tsukiyama family as a servant. Strong connections made through family ties would be the difference maker in preserving an entire bloodline. This would easily be one of the most disturbing, with the Ghoul restaurant being a secret society. When it comes to being a member, it'd be very specific, and only a chosen few would actually have a chance in being part of such a thing. This would be esteemed for the higher class people in society, such as the aristocrats when it comes to the Roswald family and the Tsukiyama family. The main attraction of the Ghoul restaurant would be the dismantling show, where many people would come in as humans and then they would be none the wiser being treated to fine dining in a nice place to stay. Little would they actually realize that they would be on the menu for numerous ghouls inside of a coliseum, causing human beings to be manipulated and then turned into a source of entertainment and food. If you didn't think that it could get any worse, this would be humans fighting against other human beings, all for the entertainment and satisfaction of ghouls through the use of scrappers, human slaves that ghouls would abduct and be forced to make meals and entertainment out of anyone that was unlucky enough to be a part of the dismantling show. Some scrappers would even get tortured if they didn't do a job that was up to the current standards. Most of the rich parasites watching this would end up having reputations from any performance that each and every different slave would end up performing, with Big Madam being one of the Ghoul restaurant's most prominent figures. One of the more interesting gangs would be the one Kaneki would find himself creating, and this would all be due to him trying to have his goals fulfilled, with the most important goal of his being the very fact that he'd want to be able to find an outlet to have the opportunity to be able to protect everyone that he cares about. He would be inspired to make this gang after being kidnapped by aogiri and then experiencing gruesome torture at the hands of Yamori. Kaneki would decide to pick and choose whoever he wants to save, and ultimately he would make the choice to kill anyone that he would think of as being evil. Kaneki would end up making certain sacrifices just as long as it would make sure that everyone that he cared about would be safe and sound. Kaneki would make sure to go up against the CCG, the Ghoul restaurant, and aogiri tree as a whole. With such a small group, you would think Kaneki is getting in over his head, but he would be able to single-handedly take out the Ghoul restaurant with his gang alone, which really only does just kind of speak to the quality that Kaneki can really dish out. With a few powerhouses coming together, anything is quite literally possible. The Apes would be a gang that would roam around the jungles of the 20th Ward, with them stylizing gorilla masks and white jackets. Their leader would undoubtedly be the Devil Ape. They would get most of their rep from taking out extremely powerful investigators by challenging them personally and then executing them. Soon after, they would develop history with the Black Dobers, leading to them having a rivalry between both the apes and the Dobers. Yoshimura, otherwise known as the Owl, would convince both the apes and the Dobers to end their rivalry and coexist, and allowing them all to be a part of Onteku, ultimately destroying the rivalry between the apes and the Black Dobers. And of course, we'd have to talk about the Black Dobers. As we already know, the Black Dobers would be a part of the 20th Ward, yet they would have masks that would be inspired by Black Dobermans. The leader of this gang would be Kaya Arimi, and she would have specific history with a certain investigator, with it being Chu Hachikawa. Thanks to the efforts of Kaya and this gang as a whole, they would give this investigator a nasty scar across his entire face, and he'd make it his sole purpose in life to kill every single last member of this gang. He really cared about his appearance, alright. Could you really blame him though? Chu would go as far as to sacrificing a civilian to reach his goals, which just goes to show what kind of influence the Black Dobermans would have on the CCG, let alone one of its best investigators. The Dobermans, just like their rival gang, the Apes, would end up joining and being a part of Onteku. The White Suits are probably the most clear-cut gang you could ever run into, with their entire name and style being based off of, you guessed it, white suits. Every single member would wear a white suit, and the gang itself would be made and founded upon the strength of every single individual. The stronger you are, the higher your position of power would be in this gang. The White Suits would work under aogiri because after all, they are a gang of ghouls. Until aogiri reaching its final send-off as an entire organization, leaving the White Suits in the hands of Kaneki. The White Suits would eventually become a part of GOAT, and Kaneki would become their full-fledged leader. With a gang like the White Suits who value strength above all else, of course, one thing that you could always count on them for is taking down anybody and anything in your way. Our next gang would have strong ties to China, with it being Qi Shi Lian. This gang would be a terrorist organization filled with many Chinese ghouls. The investigator we know as Hoji would handle the case for Qi Shi Lian and fight them all, and help the CCG and the Chinese authorities ultimately take this gang out. Tadaro would have very strong ties to this gang, with his brother being its leader. Unfortunately, Hoji would be successful with taking down Qi Shi Lian because he would kill Tadaro's brother. And with that being said, Qi Shi Lian would be disbanded because they would no longer have a leader. Tadaro's last chance of survival would be to leave and flee to Japan and find security in joining Aogiri Tree. Tadaro would make it his life's mission to find Hoji down and get revenge on Hoji for killing his brother. As we already know, the Tsukiyama family has very strong ties when it comes to aristocracy, with high-class ghouls living within the family. On top of the huge amount of wealth and their connection with the Rosewald family, you could really only guess just how much power they really have. They would have an international business conglomerate, which allowed their hands to be put in a place of power where ghouls wouldn't even dream of. They would specialize in importing and exporting goods, transporting iron and steel, food, and this would be possible all while specializing in different sciences. For centuries, no one would ever even think that they were ghouls, and they would blend in perfectly, with well-established politicians and the like being none the wiser. Yet the family would meet its grim end due to an investigator capturing 2 employees that worked for the manor and torturing them until they finally got information on the Tsukiyama family, with the family in of itself being exposed. The CCG would make the most out of trying to exterminate them, with the majority of the members actually dying. This is the gang I think we're all most familiar with, the one that we could be the most comfortable with, that being Onteku. Onteku would be everyone's favorite coffee shop in Tokyo. Being located in the 20th Ward, it would provide aid for many ghouls and become a safe haven against the CCG and aogiri. Any average person living in Tokyo that would visit this coffee shop would be none the wiser, because little would they actually know that a ghoul would be serving them coffee. It isn't too far-fetched to say that this is just simply a place where ghouls want to live in peace and live peacefully amongst humans, even if society will let them do anything but that. And the 20th Ward would be the perfect place for this shop to be, because this ward would end up being the most peaceful, and the CCG's attention would be averted from the 20th Ward because they'd be busy focusing on other wards. making Anteku the ideal place for any ghoul to live in. At least, if you want to handle the life you already have in society, that is. Aogiri. When it comes to this gang, it's a lot easier to describe it for what it is, a cult and nothing more. Aogiri is a gang based on the philosophy of creating a world 100% by ghouls, for ghouls, making it so that humans can no longer suppress and ruin the lives of many ghouls that have suffered throughout many years. Decades, possibly centuries of ghouls suffering due to society throwing their lives away. When you think about it, Aogiri is much more than a simple gang. They are a cult, they are a worldwide phenomenon that aims to change everything in Japan and eventually the world by gathering every single last ghoul that it can get its hands on. Good, evil, it wouldn't really matter. Just as long as the ghouls would reign on top, their end goal would be, rest assured, a certainty that not even the CCG could fully even comprehend, because Aogiri's greatest weapon would be their faith, their belief in destroying the CCG and changing the world that society has ultimately created for the worst of ghoul lives. Now we would have Ri, which would be an iconic recreation of the Anteku coffee shop. This time, instead of Yoshimura or the owl being the leader of the coffee shop, Yomo and Toka would find themselves creating and offering everything to the Ri coffee shop, allowing members of the GOAT organization to even stay there for shelter. Easily, the most influential group in Tokyo Ghoul would be GOAT, with it being founded by Kaneki. The main goal of this group would be to make a world where both humans and ghouls can coexist and live together in peace and harmony. This would be possible through negotiations with the one thing standing in their way, the CCG. What makes GOAT so special is that they would have the powers of Aogiri, Anteku, and the Tsukiyama family all combined, creating a driving force with the potential to change everything. Rather than throwing away human lives like Aogiri, GOAT would do the opposite and protect the lives of the humans, yet still benefit ghoul lives, making each and every single life have value. GOAT would throw away the endless killing of numerous lives, with Kaneki being its only means of making this a reality. Now we would have the CCG, otherwise known as the Commission of Counter Ghoul. The CCG would strive for the protection of the human race, and it would be made for the sole purpose of the extermination of ghouls. In the name of the law and society itself, they would take it upon themselves to enact justice on any and every single ghoul that they would find within Tokyo. In the name of the protection of the masses, the CCG would be able to legally get away with killing any and every ghouls that they run into. The CCG would without a doubt value the lives of human beings above all else, and they would have the power of society and the world supporting and defending them for doing things that would make ghoul lives worthless. The Washu clan would be a clan of ghouls that come from the Middle East. They would be solely responsible for the creation of the CCG, and they would retain a majority of the CCG's power and influence as its leaders. The law would give the Washu clan an undoubtable amount of power. The Washus would care about the results, nothing more, nothing less. When it comes to a mission, they will sacrifice as many lives as possible as long as it gets their goals done, which is very relative to that of an Eastern philosophy. Ironically enough, the Washu clan would be ghouls running and posing as humans, defending human lives while throwing away ghoul lives. Does that really make sense? Ghouls that would throw away other ghoul lives for their own prosperity. Ghouls would be using humans as puppets to actually enact and take the lives of their own race. But this backstabbing nature would only make sense because after all, the Washus would only benefit from all of this happening, with them never having to get their hands dirty because they would just dish out the Group V as corpse collectors, letting the Washus eat and feast on any human bodies that they needed in peace and harmony, all the while leeching off of the suffering of humans and ghouls at the same time. Coming to the final stretches, we would have V, otherwise known as Vasuki. This is definitely one of the most shady and interesting organizations in the entire series, with V wanting to keep society the same way that it is by allowing ghouls and humans to continuously kill themselves in an endless cycle. They want to establish an equilibrium, with the society never changing at all. Aogiri would take V's notions and plans and ruin them. V would force themselves onto the owl and make them live his life to their bidding. forcing him to kill humans in power, ghouls in power, and also rival gangs and organizations. V would ultimately strive for nothing to ever change, unlike every other organization on this list. The clowns are easily the most disturbing, with them being surrounded by a huge amount of mystery. This gang would have one goal and one purpose only, and that would be to simply set out chaos and do whatever they want. Anything that they think is fun, they're just going to do. If they want to kill people, they're going to kill people. They're just going to do anything in their power to cause mayhem and destruction all throughout Tokyo. They would want to have the last laugh. Now, what that could actually possibly mean is a mystery, but what we do know is that they lurk in the shadows and have power across every single organization in the series, and they would turn the entire world upside down if given the chance, with them being the lead cause as to why Kaneki would have even became a ghoul at all. Finally, we would have the Tokyo Security Committee, or TSC. This would be the last standing organization at the end of the series, with them reigning and controlling the majority of power within society, with them being the overall replacement for the CCG. They would be an organization completely founded to take out all of the dragon orphans that Kaneki left roaming around Japan. The TSC would have nothing more than peacekeepers serving under them, while also partnering with the United Front. They would keep humans and ghouls safe altogether, and change the entire structure of the world as a whole and what everyone would initially think about the coexistence between humans and ghouls. The TSC would be a testament as to just how possible peace and harmony could truly be.